So I grew up in northern Michigan, and that's where I live currently, actually. And yeah, I love it up here. It's beautiful nature. It's like I live in Traverse City, Michigan, which is a nice, like, small walkable town. Um, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I push for, it's cool to see that we actually have it here, which is awesome. Uh, but yeah, in terms of like my upbringing, um, related to what I'm doing now, I don't know if there's really too much directly related, but I always have had kind of this engineering mindset, going back even to when I grew up as a kid. And I always loved to play with things and figure things out and, figure out how either things worked or how things could be better. And I think that theme has definitely carried through with what I'm doing now. So that's kind of been one thing that, with whatever I've done in life, there's always that aspect of trying to figure out how to either do it better or figure out how it could work better for the people using it or whatever it might
Yeah.
be, if it's a system or a road or whatever.
Did you decide to pursue that interest and study urbanism planning, anything related to that in college? Like, what was the next step?
Yeah, so well, actually during high school, I, uh, how you always meet with like the guidance counselors and stuff to try to figure out what you want to do with your life. And I remember I told her that I wanted to go into urban planning, and she said, "That's crazy. No one's ever said that before," especially in high
She's like,
school.
why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's like, "Urban planning? I've never heard someone say that." But crazy enough, actually, her husband was an urban planner in the
Oh,
city that we lived. So she's like, "That's crazy because my urban husband's an urban planner." So I ended up like job shadowing him for a bit, and then I ended up actually working for that township for the planning department there. And yeah, that was like definitely a good eye-opening experience of like how it works at like the governmental level. And
Mm,
I remember we had, different things that would go on and stuff, but I ended up getting really involved with, or not necessarily involved, but really interested in the business side of things and like the development. Because I was like, okay, you know, when you're working for a city or, a township in this case, for any sort of like municipal entity, you're kind of doing like site plans and reviews and, getting these things that come to you and then you approve them or whatever. So, uh, I wasn't really interested in that at the time, and still not necessarily. That wouldn't be my dream job of like reviewing site plans and approving them, and basically just stamping them for approval. But I did like the whole development aspect. So I was like, okay, these are actually the people that are like designing what is going on these different parcels of land, uh, and so I was like, I really want to get more into like the business and like development side of things. So I ended up actually going to school for business instead of urban planning.
mm, mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
the passion never went away, and I continued to kind of stick through it with college. And uh, yeah, I feel like a lot of it came back because I ended up going to school down in the Cincinnati area, and
Okay.
yeah, just living then in a fairly urban environment then where it is walkable and you can bike around and you see kind of all of this transportation stuff going on. It got me really interested in that, which I always was, but just kind of like going to some advocacy meetings and meeting some people that are getting involved in that space and trying to figure out how they can actually make the built environment better was really encouraging for me. It was like eye-opening of like, hey, this is really cool to see that like these people aren't just sitting here and saying, okay, well, this is how the roads are, and that's just, you know, that's that's forever how
Yeah.
they're going to be. And it's like, no, we can actually do this better. And so the advocacy part really sparked my interest in wanting to do this more of like career wise. And I was doing a
Uh-huh.
lot more media stuff at the time. And so I kind of started shifting it to do media about transportation and urban planning and stuff because, like I said, that passion never really went away. And I always continued to, study it on my own. And through getting involved with advocacy stuff, I learned a lot about the actual technical aspects of like, oh, you can't just, bulldoze a road and put bike lanes down the middle. Like there are a lot of standards and requirements of like how roads are built and what can actually be physically possible and politically possible and stuff like that. So um, yeah, so I really kind of stuck with the whole passion and got really into the transportation side of things. And then that's kind of how Streetcraft was born, is that I started making videos about these kind of things. And they started getting traction online and went from there.
So it's kind of funny because like you jumped into the most serious and could also sometimes be not very interesting portion of urban planning,
Yeah.
like the real stuff of the approvals.
Yeah. It's like making
So
sure that
like,
it complies with, the zoning codes and making sure the
right.
signs are set back far enough from the road so they don't block people's views.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
interesting
And
stuff. No, I mean it was actually, I will say it was interesting to learn it and like it was such a good eye-opening experience for sure. I mean, it's such a huge field. Like people are always like, "Oh, I'm really interested in like what you do." Like, how do I get into that? I'm like, "Well, what part of it?" Like, do you want to because there's the entire political side of like how do you get funding for these things and how do you get
mm,
people in councils to approve them and so there's that entire aspect, and you can go into public policy or like, do you want to figure out which kind of trees to plant and what kind of street lamps to put in? Like, those are complete opposite sides of the spectrum. Or like, do you want to calculate forces on asphalt and figure out if it's going to be able to withstand, vehicle traffic? Like, there's so many different aspects to it that's like
yeah.
the circle is like huge that it was just exciting because there's I feel like so many ways to get into it and so many different angles that you can come into it from too. And so I always tell people, I'm like, well, whatever like your passion is, there's usually a path into this, something in this realm, like whether you're an artist or an engineer or like, policy person or, whatever. It's like there's always going to be some sort of aspect that it relates to in some way, it seems like.
Then take us back to when Streetcraft started. Did you have any kind of vision for what it would become today? Or did you start and say, I'm going to do one post, it's going to be about this? What was your first post?
It was a YouTube video about a diverging diamond interchange in Florida.
Well,
Uh,
okay. A diverging diamond.
Diverging diamond interchange, which is an
Okay.
interchange design that's fairly, they've really started popping up more in the past few years, but they reduce conflict points and they help with vehicle flow and efficiency. But the one in Florida I thought was really interesting because I had driven through it a bunch because I have family that lives down there, and it's actually I found out the world's largest diverging diamond interchange.
Hmm.
But it's just like massive, and it always fascinated me how it works because you drive onto the opposite side of the road, and so kind of with my this was like many years before I even posted the video, but I was like, what how does that work? Like, what's the benefits of that? Like, why did they do it that way? That's always kind of how I've thought about things, and so I kind of did a deep dive many years prior to that, and uh, yeah, I was like, that would be a really interesting video, and it was always just kind of on the back burner in my mind that. I was like, it'd be fun to like make a video or like explain that someday. And so when I started Streetcraft, I was like, this would be a perfect first example. Like I've been wanting to make this video for a really long time. And so I finally did. And it was really cool to like dive even deeper into it because I knew how it functioned. I knew what the benefits were and stuff like that. But I never, I learned even more, which was really fascinating and actually like walked through it and stuff. And uh, the video also relates to more than just this interchange, but talks more about how we design places as a whole and like how it all affects each other and kind of the relationship between, our even like our zoning and uh, how we build, the actual destinations and what
Hmm.
creates traffic and stuff like that and how we get around. But, it's kind of like a very beginner video that like talks about this, this complicated interchange, but it also talks about these concepts of uh, urban design and urban planning and kind of some of the principles of like urbanism and transportation and stuff like that.
Sorry, I looked it up while you're speaking. It's a fucking crazy looking
It's pretty,
interchange.
yeah, it's pretty
We'll have to put
crazy.
an image of it in the video.
So what creates traffic? I mean, you probably, I don't know if you
Stupid
know,
people.
but so we're based in LA. So
Hmm.
I don't know how often you come to LA, but I feel like LA needs a lot of love, to make things a bit more pedestrian friendly and
Yeah.
and just and everything just better. I mean, it's also a huge place, but it really needs improvement. But anytime we're stuck, on the freeway, in traffic, and we're always like, but what creates traffic? So if you have an answer to that question, I would love to know.
Could you come to LA and save LA?
Streetcraft saves LA.
Yeah, I like that. Could be a whole
I like
series.
that. Yeah, I like that a lot.
That would take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would take a while. That's for
It
sure.
would take a long time.
Because it's
They
like
are doing some
it's like
stuff,
8 years when they add one lane to a freeway.
Yeah.
You know. So, oh yeah, they're building a new overpass. Oh yeah, that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah. So to answer the question of what creates traffic, I mean, it's just people. Like we all need to get around, and there's only so much capacity for it to move so many people. But it's also people in the sense of, we're human, biology, we're run by our brains, and like we get scared of things and we hit the brakes a little too soon, and we don't follow people as closely as we want to.
Yeah.
And so, that all starts to, fall onto itself of like, well, one person stops too soon, and then the next person stops too soon, and then like, that kind of creates like some traffic jams and stuff. There's like this whole concept of like I forgot what it's called, like ghost traffic, but there's like a snake that you can like watch move down. Um, it's not a very good explanation of it, but there's videos on YouTube of it, but you can see how like traffic moves kind of like in these waves just because of like human reaction time and stuff, and how it all kind of trickles down from the next person, the next person, the next person. And but yeah, so that's a very kind of simplified answer to why traffic exists, but
No, that makes sense.
So if we all had self-driving cars,
yeah, there wouldn't be traffic.
any traffic.
Not as
right?
much.
I mean,
no.
there's definitely a lot of like talk about that, and like how that definitely could help with traffic congestion, because it's like, if they can all talk to each other, then they can move faster, and you don't need as much dependence on like the human psychology aspect of it.
What about interchanges? I mean, what was it?
Diverging
something
diamond.
diverging diamonds. I mean, you must know of all the different types of interchanges. One, I guess, for listeners, like how many types are there? And is there one that is like considered just the best? And why don't we all just do that if there is a best one?
It is interesting because there's a lot of different types of interchanges, and depending on how like you classify them and stuff. But so there's different types of interchanges too. So there's ones that are going between different freeways, and so you have ramps that are free flowing in every direction, and is to get traffic from one freeway to another. And so there's all different types of those. There's like stack interchanges and stuff. So LA has a lot of those where you like stack several layers on top of each other,
Yeah.
and you get those super tall interchanges. So each one gets like their own ramp to go over, onto the next freeway. And then there's also interchanges for you to get off the freeway. So, those are like the on and off ramps for connecting with, just a regular city street. And there's all different types of those as well. That's what a diverging diamond interchange is. It's a traffic signal controlled interchange. And so you have the overpass or underpass for the freeway, depending on how it's designed, and then the actual intersections through the interchange are what manages the traffic getting on and off the freeway. So it depends on like the type of configuration of what you're trying to get traffic between. I will say this is not the best one. This is probably one of the worst ones, but cloverleaf interchanges are being phased out a lot in a lot of places, just because those are the ones where there's that loop ramp on each quadrant of the interchange. And so they are free flowing, but you have to weave between each other. And so the exiting traffic has to weave in the same lane with the entering traffic of, whatever interchange or wherever those ramps are going to.
Right.
So I'm sure you've, driven to one of those at one point where you're trying to get over, but then the other person's trying to get over in the same exact spot.
Yeah.
You end up doing like a 270-degree kind of like turn around.
Yeah.
If you're going straight, you end up going left, you do a full 270.
Yeah, you do like a whole big loop around. But partial cloverleaf interchanges are actually a pretty good design. They have opposite quadrants. So if there's one at like the northeast corner, the one at the southwest corner or whatever. So it's there's no conflict between the actual traffic flowing through the loop part of it.
And then what about surface street speeds? I think we're all fairly familiar with like the classic just four-way stop sign or signal intersection. But like in Europe, and I don't know how much of your content or how much of your research to say extends beyond the United States, but in Europe, the what are they called? Is it called the roundabout? The one with
Yeah.
the
Well,
big circle in the middle is
Yeah.
like very, very common. And then as an, anecdotally as an American, the first time I went to Europe and drove there, I'm like, what the fuck is this thing?
But I
Because
feel like
I'm from California. I know these exist in other states, but in California, they're not very common.
but they're pretty simple in Europe. I feel like the ones here are very confusing.
What? There's still a circle. How?
I don't know. I feel like every time I don't know, they have like weird points of entry, or there is like double lanes and things going in different direction. And I'm like, roundabout should be straightforward. It's just, turn around it, pick your direction and
Right.
go.
Right.
But for some reason, every one we've experienced here, they confuse me.
Yeah, so roundabouts have definitely taken off in popularity in the US. And feel like there's like this ongoing joke with my audience that every time I make a video, because I have made a fair amount of videos where like I create a roundabout as like a solution to like a different intersection or whatever. And so now every time I get a comment that's like, well, why don't you just turn it into a roundabout? That's probably the number one
Yeah.
comment, which is always followed up by, don't make it a roundabout. Americans don't know how to use roundabouts. So
Yeah.
very, very continuous ongoing debate that will never end. But yeah, they have really taken off actually in the US. And they have a lot of benefits actually. They reduce vehicle speeds, first of all, which is kind of like the reason that they have so many safety benefits. But yeah,
Mhm.
they do like a 90% reduction in fatal crashes. I think it's like 70% in serious injury crashes because everyone's pretty much going, 20 miles an hour under most of the time, as long as they're
Yeah.
designed correctly. And you're just yielding to traffic that's already in the circle. So pretty much everyone, there's at least someone moving at all times through a roundabout. So, it helps a lot with
That's good.
vehicle efficiency too. People are always moving and uh, you just have to wait for it to be clear and then you go on your way. And once you're in, then you can go any direction you want. And the traffic that is entering is supposed to yield to you. So it helps a lot with efficiency and safety. But like your point,
is there any
also,
downside to them? Is there a limit to is there any downside to using that as a solution? Like, or is it?
Well,
I'm
I
trying
think
to think
it's
if
to
there's.
do with the speed too, right, at which you're approaching it.
Well, sure.
I mean, I
Like you
don't
wouldn't do
think
it on
you
a
could.
freeway.
Right.
yeah,
Maybe on a massive scale you could,
But the
not.
cool thing with them too is that I feel like even for pedestrian, it's probably easier for them to cross because you're not tied to waiting for the lights and having to rush or like, cars being stopped for 5 minutes
don't
because
know.
somebody's
Is that-
crossing.
Is that true? Because I feel like as a pedestrian,
Well,
maybe I'd feel safer if I knew that there was, a
light.
a little white walking man signal.
yeah, it really depends on the setup. Like you said, some of them are, big multi-lane roundabouts that are built in
Mhm.
the US. And, I would say those are arguably not the best for pedestrians, especially if they don't have any sort of, traffic control for the crosswalks. But, if it's just a simple one-lane roundabout, the cool thing about roundabouts is that they have a splitter island, pretty much all the time that splits the traffic that is entering or exiting the roundabout. And in the middle of that is, a spot where there are no cars. It's just a, refuge island for pedestrians. And so whenever you're crossing a roundabout, you just cross the entrance part of it, and then you wait in the middle, and then you cross the other half of it. So if it's just a one-lane roundabout, and, the vast majority of roundabouts in the US are just one-lane roundabouts, uh, it's not too intimidating of a thing to just cross one lane of traffic and then cross the second lane of traffic. And,
Mhm.
most of the time, well, the rule is that you're supposed to yield to pedestrians as well. And, I'd say it obviously depends on where you live and how familiar drivers are, but, that is the law that you also yield to the pedestrians. And so drivers are already going slow. They're already, looking for cars to yield to. And, most of
Mhm.
the time, at least from my experience, they also yield to you as a pedestrian. So there's
Most
also
of the
different,
time.
most of you can never control drivers 100%. But yeah, there's also different like traffic control things that you can use at roundabouts. And so I actually have a whole YouTube video that I made about this, but you can do like those rectangular flashing yellow signs if you've ever seen those. You push
Hmm.
the button and they like flash to let you know that a pedestrian's crossing.
Hmm.
Those have pretty good success rate. And then they're called hawk signals, or a pedestrian hybrid beacon. And it's basically like a traffic signal, but they chopped off the green light and added an extra red light.
Hmm.
It sounds confusing because it is for a lot of people, but um, it runs through a few different phases and has, what has two red lights on top, and so you're supposed to stop, and then they start flashing, alternating, and that means you're supposed to stop and then cross when or you're supposed to, as a driver, you're supposed to go again once it's clear. But people have a lot of
I don't think
opinions
I've
about
ever
those.
seen that. And yeah, that would confuse the shit out of me if
Well,
I saw
that's the thing is that, I mean, I think there is some like new signalétic that could be great, but people need to know how to use them. I think it was one of our last time we were in San Francisco. We were driving through, just like a
normal two-way street.
like a normal two-way street, with parking on each side of the street.
Mhm.
And at some point, the street narrows down to one
lane.
one lane, but there is still two-way traffic coming, on either side. And so there's basically a car coming straight at you, and you're coming straight at them.
Yeah.
And the street kind of like reduces, and we were all like sitting on either side. We're like, whose turn is it? How is this supposed to work? And it's something we've never seen before.
I think it's because I did remember reading about it when they were implementing it, and then hearing news about it after it was put in. And they did it because they were trying to give more space to bike lanes, or create bike lanes. And the street was it was narrow enough so where they couldn't do that while also keeping the same number of lanes. And so I think that was it. I could be wrong.
Pinch points, basically.
But yeah, it was this moment of we're in our car and we're face to face with this woman who's facing us, and she was equally confused, and she was like getting really frustrated, not at us, but just at the situation.
Yeah.
And it was comical because she was upset, but also just really confused and didn't know what she was supposed to do.
I know exactly what
And she
you're
wasn't
talking about.
forcing her
I've
way.
seen that same
Do you?
example show up online. Yeah. So it is intentional, and it is to help, reduce vehicle speeds. One of the weird kind of things about driving is sometimes, very big disclaimer on this, but sometimes confusion can actually be a good thing for safety, because it makes people pay attention, and, you're sitting there both stopped facing each other in this case. And, it forces people to pay attention. And that's kind of like the same thing with like roundabouts. Everyone has to stop and pay attention for a second before they're, going on their way. But yeah, it's part of, traffic calming in general, is to do these kind of things. That one, I have mixed feelings about that particular one, because I feel like, if you're saying, hey, this is traffic calming, it's designed to like make our neighborhood streets safer, and it's just, making everyone really upset. The next time someone says, hey, we're going to do traffic calming, it's probably going to like, just cause an uproar. So I think there's different ways to do, there's a lot of ways to do traffic calming actually, but that is one that is used in rare cases. And like you said, it might have been a situation with like the bike lane. I think there was some sort of bike lane thing with that one. If it wasn't that exact one, there is also some sort of example out there that I've seen before too with that. But it was interesting because again, it comes back to human psychology and like how we, perceive, speed, and how we perceive danger and risk and stuff, and then how we adjust our behavior accordingly. That's one of the things that I've always found really fascinating about traffic engineering in general, is that there's so many different types of engineering, obviously, and so much of it is right or wrong. Like it's mathematical equations, and the bridge structure either works or it doesn't. Like there's no room for gray area there. But with traffic engineering, there's the entire human psychology aspect of it. And it's like, how is it actually going to function when you put people into it? Because, everyone is going to see things differently and respond to things differently. And I just think it's really fascinating, first of all, but it also makes that type of engineering, I think, so much more difficult, or at least, maybe nuanced, or you just have to take into account that like people are going to see this differently. So how do you get best compliance with some of this stuff, and how do you make sure that like it is going to do what you want it to actually do? And I think traffic calming is kind of it's a response to our human psychology, because it's like we wouldn't actually need traffic calming at all if we were all robots because we'd all go the speed limit. But it's like, we want to go faster and we see a big wide street that's, completely open and we're like, okay, we're going to drive faster. And then, the people living on that street don't want that. So then they put speed bumps in and it's like speed bumps
Right.
is just because we are really bad at following signs.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
that's a good way of describing speed bumps. Actually, I never thought about it that way. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a number of questions come up. I mean, one of them is that you mentioned this the psychology of all of this, and it's interesting because I feel like sometimes when I speak to engineers of any type of engineer, and this is not all engineers, I'm speaking generally, that they're not often the best people to think about the human psychology component because their brain tends to work more mathematically, let's say, and if it calcs out to be correct, then it's correct, and then in their view sometimes it's like, why are we even having any more discussion about anything else because it pencils out to be correct. I've checked my math, that's it, there's no more discussion. But of course when it comes to things like people driving 1 ton 2 ton automobiles or whatever it is, the weight, that becomes a huge factor. I think one of the videos I saw of yours, and I think it might have gotten a lot of traction as well, was you had compared 2 suburban neighborhoods. I think they might have been in Michigan. And you started off by saying, here are these 2 neighborhoods. They look identical. And they did look, as far as I could tell, like identical. And they were right next to each other. But you had said that living in one versus the other is a very, very different experience. And I don't want to just take over it, because I was like, can you talk us through what that I'm sure you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and how you came to I mean, how you came to do a video about that, because that's quite different from just the speeds of traffic and interchanges. That's now you're thinking like on a real big urban scale from the perspective of a person.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always, like I said, I've made videos about a lot of roads, obviously, but I also have covered, the rest of urban planning quite a bit as well, talking about housing and zoning and stuff like that. But this video was really interesting because I think it was kind of a combination of all of these things because it highlights, primarily of how people are getting around, but it talks about the relationship with how housing is built and how that is going to impact it and how we, actually do our urban design in general. Um, so yeah, like you said, the neighborhoods are right next to each other, and it's a journey of going to get pizza. That's the story behind this video.
I
And
love
so
it.
it's like, what would your life look like if you want to go get pizza? And the first neighborhood is a mixed use neighborhood with kind of it's called like new urbanist. I'm sure you're familiar
Hmm.
with like that term, but it's ironic because it really isn't new actually. It's just like
No, it's
follow
not.
it's just following like traditional town, small town kind of scale and planning and stuff. But it's kind of doing it more on like a master plan scale, and that's how this neighborhood was developed. But yeah, it's just like what looks like most people like just a traditional kind of small town America main street with houses and, like because that's what it is. But like it's interesting just because of like how kind of far away we've drifted from that when it comes to like
Yeah,
especially suburban design. But
yeah.
so
Now,
anyway, the
now it's
video,
new again.
yeah, now
We've
it's this
drifted so
new
far away that
this
now
new
it's
idea.
new. The old thing is new.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so it talks about, so you're in your neighborhood and you want to go get pizza and uh there's sidewalks and it's tree lined and uh all of the garages are behind the houses and alleys, and so you're walking along your street and it feels like an actual street because there's a continuous sidewalk. It's not interrupted by constant driveways, and it allows trees to be planted along, and the whole scale just feels like a kind of old school neighborhood. And so you walk along the sidewalk, it's continuous throughout the whole thing, and then you make it to the little pizza place, which is placed right on the street. The parking is behind it. And so again, there's like that streetscape and that street feel of like this is actually a place. It's not just a pizza restaurant here. It's placed next to a grocery store, or, hair salon or whatever it might be. And they all kind of exist on this street in a traditional sense. And so it very quickly kind of basically runs through those points and highlights why some of these design aspects make it feel so different. And then it contrasts to the neighborhood across the street, which is, your typical American suburban development, where it's all just single family housing. It's just, designed in the traditional sense that everyone gets a driveway, everyone has their garage. It's just, what you picture when
Hmm.
you picture just generic American suburbia. Uh, so there's no pizza restaurant, and so you have to drive, and you notice everyone's trash cans sitting out right on the street because it's must be trash day, and uh, I think there was a sidewalk, but again, it's like interrupted by driveways constantly, and so there's not really this place of or this sense of place there.
Hmm.
And then you get in your car, you drive, uh, down the street to the nearest shopping center because you don't have a pizza restaurant in your neighborhood, and so you have to drive down the huge 5-lane road. You go across 4 lanes of traffic to try to turn into this place, and it's just a strip mall, Domino's takeout place, but they have like these two picnic tables out front that are like basically in the parking lot, and
Right.
you're overlooking the Panera Bread and like the
Yeah.
the giant highway behind it. And it's like, so even if you
Yeah.
wanted to like go sit outside, like technically you can still go to this pizza place and like sit outside, just like the first example. But like it also goes to prove the point of like the actual experience you're gonna have is gonna be so different, just in terms of like quality. Like you're getting, not a scenic view of like a pleasant streetscape. You're just looking at a parking lot. And so uh I love that video because it like highlights all of these different aspects of like how, first of all, how you get around, and like the safety aspect of like trying to get there. And
Mm.
one example too that I forgot is it's showing like when you're driving to this pizza restaurant then, and the actual intersection as soon as you leave the neighborhood actually has, well, it has no crosswalks, but they also have signs of that show like no pedestrian. It's like the cross out sign for pedestrians telling you
Oh
not
my.
to
Yeah.
cross because uh, there's no sidewalk on the other side, so there's really nowhere to walk even. But yeah, it's like it talks about the relationship between of like, first of all, just the beauty aspect of it, and like, what is a pleasant place to be? What do we consider, pleasant places to look like? They're usually landscaped and not full of traffic, and they're quaint kind of small places. And then it also talks about the actual transportation aspect and the safety and like there's the pleasantness of that and the accessibility of it, and like can you walk to places, or like even if you're driving, like what is that driving experience even like? Is it,
Hmm.
do you feel safe driving across 4 lanes of traffic and stuff like that?
Hmm.
And then it also just kind of touches on not a ton, but it does touch a little bit kind of on the housing aspect of it too, and like how slightly higher levels of density. Like we're still talking about a suburban neighborhood here. Like it's not like this is high density, by any means. It's, I would still say, fairly low density. It's just, townhomes, or like, or even just
Hmm.
like houses that are like single family houses just closer together uh, with the alley behind it. And it's like just some of those small design cues, or like just the small density changes allow some of this other stuff to be possible. And like that's kind of why it all feels and looks this way and why it works this way, versus when everyone has to have a huge front yard, or it's like they're not even using that as a functional space. Most people don't
Yeah.
hang out in their
Mhm.
giant front yard in their suburban home. But uh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just
Just a place
interesting to
to
That's
like
suck
how
up
something I
we're,
suck up
never.
water.
Yeah,
it's
that's
interesting to
something I
see like
never
how we're using
understood.
space. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, no, that's the front yard is something I never understood. Like I grew up in France, so people don't have giant front yards. It's all about the backyard experience. And as much as it makes the, let's say, suburban American neighborhood look pretty on picture with those big green lawn, freshly trimmed for everyone, it's such a wasted space.
Well, it used to be more used. I feel like. I mean, I
Do you
haven't done
think?
any research on this, but I feel like if we go back to like the 50s, like people were outside playing in the front. And it probably had to do with the fact that the streets were not nearly as filled with traffic,
I
because you
mean,
could play in the middle of the street. I mean,
I
actually, if I think about my own family, all of my relatives would be my parents' age, who again, like baby boomer generation, they all remark like, yeah, when this was the childhood house, it was different because there were no cars. So we were always in the front or the
yeah,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, they use the backyard, of course, but in the front, playing with friends and doing whatever, like you see in the movies, and that you can't do that anymore because there's cars lined on both sides parked, and there's cars flying down at 45 miles an hour.
And
You
also,
can't
I
do
think
it.
the width of the driveways are huge now. Before cars were small, so
That's
the
true.
driveway was like the skinny, paved path. Now it's like half of your front yard is driveway, which
Yeah.
is sad, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the driveway point is, because it really is true. Like, especially when it's just constantly interrupted, you don't have that continuous, kind of
Yeah.
shared community space. I mean, obviously everyone's front yard is their own, but like, when it's constantly interrupted by a driveway, it kind of sets that boundary of like, okay, here's my space, here's the next space, here's the next space. And like,
Yeah.
it just, it's just, like you said, it doesn't really set up an environment for kids to want to play around, parked vehicles or whatever else is there.
Yeah, you can't hit a baseball if there's like a bunch of cars. we care about cars apparently, not houses when it comes to baseball.
But the alley setup is kind of interesting, and I don't know if it's more trendy in certain states versus others. I mean, I remember, going to Chicago, the alley seems like a lot more common over there than maybe it is on the West Coast.
Are you talking about in a suburban setting or an urban setting?
I guess maybe it's more common in urban settings, I would imagine, because of like service alley, delivery type of thing versus suburban where it's a bit less common, I feel like.
I mean, we've seen them, but not as often. Yeah.
I mean, we do
it's
see it
definitely
down,
not as common.
down here. Yeah. But I could see the appeal for it.
Yeah.
Like I'm a huge, against garage. Garages being the main feature of a facade of a house. Same with the driveway. So I would happily kick those in the back and have the alley configuration. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It is, like you said, it's a little more common in urban settings and just, kind of traditional, I wouldn't even say suburb, but like, what kind of traditional suburbs were of like, not outside or just outside of like the downtown core of American cities. And so you look at like a lot of these cities where they're just old neighborhoods, basically. Like it's not, they're not really suburbs, but a lot of those are designed kind of in that alley fashion. But like you said, like most new suburban development does not follow that same pattern.
I wonder
and I wonder if that's also because in a way it takes more space. Or I mean, actually, I don't know if it really does. Like, if by doing that you do have to have lots that are less long, because you need more roads. So therefore, people want to max out their investment by having more land they can sell rather than more land like we can share. Let's say.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really does divide up the land into like much more kind of individual plots of like this is mine, this is mine, and when you have kind of that alley, usually it's more of like row housing or it's townhouses or whatever, just because like that style kind of works well with that. But you do kind of eliminate that whole like fenced in backyard. Like you can't really have that fenced in backyard with a alley behind your house, really. I mean, you can if it's further out, but in the traditional sense, there's not really that rear space, and so it really doesn't take up. It's actually kind of the opposite in terms of how much space it takes up. The alley kind of setup can be very efficient for fitting more housing in the same amount of space, but it doesn't have as much of that. You don't have as big of a yard for yourself in that kind of setup.
Yeah, there's a mentality, like going back to the idea of the psychology of everything, right? There's a mentality that comes with properties or neighborhoods that are designed a certain way, and it encourages people to think more about themselves in the sense that there's them and their domicile and their space, and then everything outside of it is the other, right? And that's outside, and it's you're not supposed to cross this fence. This is my area, and there's a kind of territorial mindset that comes with it. I mean, I grew up in a very classic suburban place down in Southern California, and then we lived in New York, and Marina's been in Paris and everywhere else, and they're very like there's a tangible difference in the larger kind of like mental state of everyone in these places, and a greater sense of community, which is an overused word sometimes, but a greater sense of community in the places where the planning has not allowed for this kind of territorial mindset. Like you don't have the option to feel that way if you're living in New York. I mean, New York is an extreme example, of course. You can't compare that to suburbia, but still that exists. And it's like, as you're speaking, it makes me realize that there are layers and there's the shades of gray of what we're describing. What I want to say was, well, actually going back. So first, the video about the two neighborhoods and going to get pizza, I thought was phenomenal. And for all the reasons you mentioned, but as well, it actually reminded me of this book I read a while ago, a long time ago now, called 20 Minutes in Manhattan by Michael Sorkin. And it's basically, Sorkin was a prolific writer about urbanism, and compared to his other books, it's a very, very light read. And it's just about him walking around in Manhattan for 20 minutes. But it does such a good job, as you did with your videos, of having like a very robust cross section across all of these different topics that get woven together, which create this good experience or this bad experience, which I think points to the complexity of all of these things. Anyway, I thought that video about the two neighborhoods was really, really good. I'm sure it resonated with a lot of people as well.
Yeah, it definitely did. Like you said, it got a lot of traction online just because I think, it does address a lot of these different aspects. And, obviously everyone has their own opinions too. I always find the comments so funny. And, whenever you post online content, you always are going to get, comments, obviously. But it always amazes me of like the people that don't understand how like situations don't have to apply to them. Like I feel like so many...
Dude, I know exactly what we talk about this all the time.
Yeah, they thought the content was just for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you would have thought I said, okay, this is better, and you have to live here now.
yeah. But that's kind of that is funny though, because
I think someone should make a video about that.
Your content is we should talk about it as well. It's incredibly well done. It's clear. It moves at a good pace. It's informative, but it's not dry. It's entertaining, but it doesn't rely on neon graphics flying around in your head, bopping, in four corners of the screen or whatever else. And it's all very logical things. So I guess my question with what you just said is like, I don't understand how someone could have an issue with anything that you post. I mean, is it people claiming that they don't like pizza and therefore this is a stupid video? Like, what is the problem? What are the things that you've seen in the comment section where people take issue with your videos? Because I wouldn't be able to understand it, like whatever it would be.
Yeah, so it really depends on the topic. I would say anything with housing, you always get the comment that it's like, I don't want to live in an apartment building. I want my land. And I'm like, okay, like, that's nice. Like, yeah, I'm not, it's actually interesting. I would love to dive into it. I touched a little briefly on it before, but the whole urbanist kind of argument is actually like very pro like rural too, because it talks about how like you have to take up so much space for like traditional suburban development. And so when you look at like density and, creating these like walkable communities, it frees up more space for like preserving rural spaces. That is probably the most commented thing for like that. I'm just like, I'm not saying you have to live like that. And like, you don't have to live in a single family home. Like you can live however you like. And just like more options for people aren't a bad thing. It's just, it's just different. And like, if anything, it's like, we need more options so you can have more of like whatever you want then. It's like, you're not competing for people that are like, trying to get the same thing as you. And it's like, if they have a different option, then that might be a better fit for them.
I think it's because we have this platform, we post stuff online, so we get plenty of comments that are in that category of they don't really respond to the actual content. They're just saying what they want to say because it makes them think of whatever. And I just think that social media turns people into kind of like stupid primate brains, and they just say stuff.
I would say then with like, when it comes to like the road videos too, I'd say a big thing with that is bike lanes. Like that seems to always trigger people. If I'm
really?
Like, oh yeah, like, there could be space for bike lanes here. And people are like, but I don't own a bike and I hate biking. And I'm like, again, maybe you don't have to use them.
Could be
Uh,
for other people.
yeah. Or it's like, but what about when it snows? I'm like, then I don't know, get in the car and drive. Like, it's not like just because a bike lane is built, that means that everyone now has to use a bike lane all the time for every trip. Like,
Yeah.
This is
it's
but
like the
this is
all or nothing
also
mentality, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. The all or nothing mentality. But this is also like it actually points to some of the very real challenges when there is a large group of people needing to render a decision about a change, whether it be on the scale of zoning for housing or putting an alley, not having an alley, speed bumps or bike lanes, all any of that stuff. If you have a city, what's the word? Not panel. Darn it, whatever there is, the panel of people up
Yeah,
on
like a
stage,
council.
the council, yeah, and they're debating, and then you have a kind of town hall meeting, and they have everyone in the town come and they all voice their opinion. This is the kind of that I think about. This is the kind of stuff you hear, which is shocking because it's in person. You think they'd be more logical, but this is the diversity. Of conflicting opinions and short-sighted opinions and thoughts that are always put forth, and it's the part of making all this stuff into reality that is very challenging and frustrating. And I personally, I've been involved in some of that stuff very lightly, and I very quickly learned like I can't handle it. It just stresses me out too much because I get annoyed with I get annoyed with everybody. And you must have seen some of that stuff though when you were working right after high school or exposed to the stuff now maybe.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this too, so this is a great transition into that. But uh, like I said, when I started doing Streetcraft, I was, doing a lot of media stuff at the time, and so it kind of was like a natural transition into that. But specifically with like the road redesigns, it was kind of born out of an advocacy perspective of like, okay, what if I can like show people what I think, it should be like? Um, and like, would that help? Would that be a benefit to the cause of advocacy, not just like, making a fun YouTube video, but like, can
Hmm.
this change people's minds or, maybe make them not worry about certain things or, just clear some things up for people. Uh, and that I think has been one of the coolest things about Streetcraft, just kind of as a whole is like I've been able to help out a lot with advocacy things and, come up with these renderings or kind of redesigned visualizations that show like here's what it might look like if we do this and here's how it would be better or here's how it might just be different like it not necessarily having an agenda but like just showing the visuals behind it and uh that's been really really powerful I think which is cool to see because it's like there's it's fairly hard for the average person to read a blueprint of a road
Yeah.
cross section. It's like, okay, what am I looking at? Is that a lane? Is that is that the right of way
Hmm.
line? Like, what am I looking at? And so, if you can show it in a visual way that makes sense to people, and especially if you can like go further than that, but not just provide a graphic, but actually explain. Here's the problem here. Here's why we're doing X, Y, Z, and here's how it's going to make people's lives better in the community. That's been a really cool thing to be able to, kind of work on and show, different projects and how they're going to look and what the benefits are and what the process look like and stuff like that. So a lot of this, I think, happens, traditionally behind closed doors of like, there's an
Yeah.
engineer that works on it, and, they might do a public input meeting, but it's like submit your comment and, or, stand up and tell us what you think at Wednesday at 3 p.m. and, the city
Yeah.
hall, and that's your only chance.
Right.
You missed it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right when everyone's picking up kids or at work.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Yeah.
Did did anyone ever reach out to you to, I don't know, maybe let's say there is a town and they were going to do a big redevelopment of an area and it's going to be terrible and they ask you to kind of like do some visual, I don't know, diagram or explanation to make up a case against it or something?
um, yeah, I've done like visualization stuff. Not necessarily like against it. It's been more for like, trying to push certain projects forward.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but yeah, that's been super fun to do that.
talk us through that in detail, though. So is it like there's a town hall meeting and then you're there with boards that you've created and you're doing like a little speech? Do you get to make a video and show the video to people?
Yeah, I've done videos pretty much.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
So it's
I would imagine everyone finds it pretty convincing.
Yeah, I've gotten really good feedback from it. And because I've worked with some different firms now, like, creating some of this content is showing kind of what their blueprints would look like in real life, and explaining all of the benefits behind it and the why and all of that stuff. And they love it because it's something completely new for like an engineering firm to have. It's like storytelling is usually not part of a design process for an engineer, and so to be able to include that and make that part of both the proposal but also the public process has been really beneficial.
It's actually it. Now that I think about it, it is a.
I mean, it's all about communication.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly vital part to having all these places actually become better, because that is there's a lot of other challenges like you pointed to earlier, like the funding of things and whatever else. But if you can't get a group of people to see the vision or even understand what the heck's going on, because like you said, blueprints are pretty abstract. If you can't get that, nothing else is going to happen. So like in the case of like, we do mostly houses, design houses, but spec houses or developments, when you're a developer, you need to have a rendering to show investors. You need to have something to get people to dream and understand and be hopeful about the thing. And to get traction, to then get the funding, to get momentum. And I'm thinking now that for these types of urban improvements, urban meaning, scale wise, it's not possible unless there is that understanding and that clarity.
Yeah,
so
it's hard for firms to do that in-house, because I'm sure they're so busy just doing the production and thinking and engineering of those things that they don't have the resource, or maybe even, I don't know, the interest or the
expertise,
skills.
Time, all that stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, I would imagine you should be really, really getting a lot of work from these offices. They should be calling you constantly, I would think.
Yeah, but it is cool too, because it's like, like with you said, with like the having to do houses and show that visually, you're selling to whatever the investor or whatever that might be. But it's a little different when it comes to like infrastructure, because it's you're not building a house for to sell. You're building public infrastructure that is going to benefit or hurt everyone that uses it. Like it's a very kind of fine line, and it's something that obviously the public gets involved with most of the time, and so it's like you're selling it almost to them, the public. And so coming up with a way to like communicate that to people who are they might not know about even some of the reasons why behind this, because it's not like the average everyday person is a traffic engineer. It's like they drive their car, I'm sure, and like maybe walk around some, but it's if they don't have an understanding of like some of the why, I think that scares a lot of people. It's like, why are we changing this? It's worked fine forever. And it's like, well, it actually hasn't worked fine. There's a significant number of crashes because of this specific design feature, and by changing it to this, we expect it to go significantly down. So it's like that's, I think, just if people can understand something, they don't know why they even might hate it or love it. So that's definitely a key aspect of it. And like you said, it's just like communication, really. It comes down to making this kind of like a communication thing.
It's so weird because for the engineers and architects, and I'm bundling those groups together, we kind of collectively spend so much time on our own work that it's sometimes hard for us as a species or group of people to realize that there's this not extra, but the last third leg of the work is really making sure that everyone understands what the heck we're proposing and the reasons behind it. And it doesn't happen as often, I would say. As most of your time. So I am wondering, are you constantly getting calls from offices and cities and everywhere else and saying, hey, can you help us out and help us convey our ideas? Or is that more of a, you do?
Yeah, I get quite a bit of inquiries about it. Yeah.
How's your time spent? How much is it for Streetcraft, for, Instagram, YouTube media? How much is it for the working with professional offices and cities, and how much of it is, I don't know, whatever else is going on?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty split evenly between them right now.
Would you ever think of scaling and having like an office of people to do more, I guess, call it production work for, the cities or the engineering offices? Because
Yeah.
I think there could be something there.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
I've
no.
kind of, yeah, not to like dive too deep into it, but I'm definitely looking at, scaling it up.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, if anyone's listening to this, because we have a lot of architects listening, you should call this guy up. Bombard him with more inquiries.
And that's some of the fun part for me too. Is like, I am a business major, so like it is fun. Just the whole
Yeah.
business
Right.
aspect of it is like
Hmm.
just being able to see how it can grow and scale, and like what what avenues is most successful for Streetcraft is kind of like another passion part of it for me. It's not just like the roads, but it's cool to see of like how can I help different groups or different organizations, and what is my time best spent on, and all of that kind of stuff.
But currently is just you, or do you have someone helping you with production?
I have one other person that helps me out with some production stuff.
Nice.
And then
Yeah.
I
So
have
I
another person that's kind of like a consultant kind of thing for some of the more engineering details and stuff like that.
gotcha. Um, I want to hear a bit more about behind the scenes, but I have a question about improving streets in general, not freeways, but like surface street, speeds. Is because you made an interesting comment about new urbanism not being new, and it made me think, like, sometimes I feel that the best solutions to improve walkability and have bike lanes and stuff are solutions that have been around for a very long time, and they're not radically new things. Like, they don't necessarily require a new technology where there's like a maglev train system or charging your car on the road. There's not like a brand new technology that requires the streets to be improved to make a neighborhood more walkable with bike lanes and whatever else. I guess, A, is that true that these things have been around forever? And if so, B, why don't we just have more of it if the solutions are there? They seem to be there. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't require reinventing the wheel to have it. They've been done in other places many times.
Yeah, it definitely does not require reinventing anything. The answer's already out there. And the simplest answer really is like just don't have as much road. Like just the best thing for a pedestrian to walk on is literally just a paved path. Like it's
Hmm.
it's not a difficult solution. It's really, separating out conflict is kind of why we've kind of dug ourselves into this, rabbit hole of bike lanes and, lanes in general, and interchanges and all of this stuff. It all comes down to trying to reduce conflict between different moving entities. So, when we look at like a bike lane, for example, it's, usually to get bikes out of traffic. And so they're not going to be hit by a car, but it's also to remove them from the sidewalk so they're not going to run into a pedestrian either. So,
Hmm.
separating out those uses uh, is kind of like the reasoning behind that. But again, it's only really happening because, well, it's happening for a few reasons, but one of the biggest things is speed. And,
Hmm.
it's just not safe for a vehicle that is moving at, 35, 45, 55 miles an hour to share a space with like a pedestrian or, even a cyclist. And so having those separated spaces is, adding obviously some complexity to the road design, but it's happening because we're adding the speed. And if
Hmm.
I think a good example is actually parking lots, because obviously it's painted where the lines are, but like people aren't plowed over in parking lots often. It's like, and drivers
Hmm.
stop for pedestrians in parking lots, and like it's usually a pretty tame environment for the most part, unless you're at like a Trader Joe's. But it's it's for that was the exception for some reason. I don't know why, but
You have a savage Trader Joe's where you live.
um, but no, I mean it's because we first of all have low speeds, but we also have the expectation that like it's a shared space, and like we mutually agree that like we're not going to run each other over. And uh, it's
Hmm.
not like we have like very specific like you have to walk in this exact spot and like all the cars have to like drive specifically here. It's like it's kind of chaos, but like it kind of works just
Hmm.
because it's simple and like uh it just keeps it uh I don't what do I want to say? Just it keeps it simple, I guess. But
Yeah,
as an
that's
urban
actually interesting, and I never thought about the fact that there are not, like in most cases, designated pedestrian paths to traverse a parking lot. And there's something about, I guess, going back to the idea of psychology, that when you're a driver or a pedestrian and you recognize that you do have to share space because there's not a delineation, now you take on as an individual the responsibility of behaving a certain way. Whereas on the extreme end, if you're given your dedicated tunnel, I'm going to blast forward in that tunnel at however fast I feel I can go because I have no other responsibilities except for, my own safety. So I'm going to go at 55 miles an hour or whatever it would be.
It's funny. What it reminded me. I was thinking in my head, like, what could architects do to help, let's say, traffic and the speed, in the streets? And it made me think, well, if we were designing beautiful buildings, maybe people would drive slower to look at them or, appreciate them. If everything is like unattractive, or you just want to zoom past it, get to your destination.
There's some truth to that, I think.
So maybe that's one way, in our field, we can somewhat have some
You still try to
impact
advocate for better
the street.
architecture.
No, but like I'm always thinking, like, what can we do on our side with our profession to help whatever else we can help? And the street is kind of a weird thing because, with our projects, we built along it, we're not on it, so we're kind of like kept away from it, but in the same time we're very much creating the surroundings, the context, the backdrop of the street. So we are huge participants in making the street. We're not the engineers, but we're still 50% of it. So
maybe not quite 50%, but yeah.
but remove the buildings, then it is just a road. But if we're not just talking about cars, but pedestrian, that is what makes most of the pedestrians experience, right? So, anyway, I was just thinking, like, what could we do then?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. I feel like I have a few ideas on it, but like how architecture actually impacts, road use. Because I think, obviously, like if you make things pedestrian scale versus car scale, it's going to feel more like a pedestrian environment, which, is nice for pedestrians. But I think it also kind of changes what the designation of the place is. Like if you have a bunch of pedestrian scale buildings that are, fairly close to the, or if they're, right on the sidewalk, not necessarily offset by a huge parking lot, that space is going to feel, more like a traditional, urban downtown setting versus if you, offset it by a huge parking lot and place the building at the back and it's, designed as a strip mall, that place is not going to feel like a urban setting. It's going to feel like a, commercial corridor. And that just continuously reinforces the like, okay, well, I've got plenty of space, it's a car space. I shouldn't see people walking. If you see people walking, you're probably going to be less likely to stop for them or, look out for them in general. You're probably just not on the expectation for it, but you're also going to drive faster. You're going to just have that mindset that like, this is a place for cars. And I think some of that really, like you said, it ties back to like how the architecture is designed. And so like, I'm thinking, what if we, I think as architects, like what if they are the ones that are, pushing to have buildings closer to the front or like put parking lots behind the building and changing what the designation of that place is going to be through the design of the buildings. And I think that really could have an impact because even going back to the whole alley thing, like that whole street feels different in a residential setting with an alley behind it versus the garages and the driveways. And it's just an arrangement of how that, was laid out. And, that's architecture. So it's like, I think there's a really good conversation to be had about that. And I don't think people talk about it very much either. And like, it really is an interesting point though.
It's also interesting because I've never met an architect who would advocate for a giant parking lot next to the sidewalk and then the building. Everyone, every one of our colleagues is like, why don't we do this differently?
And a lot of it too comes from, like the codes, right? And
definitely.
the things we have to comply. And sometimes, mean, as you know, and I'm sure as you've seen it, sometimes you could get a better quality, project if there was maybe more conversation between, let's say, the planning and building department and the design team to try and make something that's not just, blindly following up the rules, but actually makes sense for this specific, place. Because I do think you're right. Like, okay, fine, you need to provide parking for your restaurant or whatever. Does it have to be on that side? Well, per the code, it has to be here, it can be there. Okay, but guys, if we sit down and look at it, like, is this going to give us the best outcome? So I wish there was ways to kind of have those more,
conversations?
More conversation about the quality of the life and the built environment that we're building, and not just being so mathematical and legal and rational about what's being built.
Yeah.
And it is a very kind of like sticky thing to bring up, because then you do that once for a project, and everyone wants their projects to be looked at that the same way. And then where do you draw the line? And then how do you enforce code? And then what is the point of the code? So it's kind of this tricky balance. But I don't know. I feel like maybe it comes from the client and the design team. If they feel like a strong reason for making up a case to talk to the city, maybe there is ways to make it happen. It is not the simplest thing, and I'm sure it happens here and there, but I just wish it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and I didn't mean to like gloss over the legal aspect of it either. I'm
No,
just
no, of course.
because I know that's like such a huge aspect of it, is like that challenge of it. Because it's like, obviously, if architects could do whatever they want, it'd be, it's probably better for the most cases.
Not all cases.
Not all.
The architects have crazy ideas.
Depends on the architect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if there were no restrictions like that, but like you said, like that really does, limit so many designs. And it's like, that's kind of why some of these places end up feeling, identical, no matter if you're, wherever you are in the country. It's like, it's because they all have the same parking codes that require those offsets and stuff. And it's like, you get your hands tied definitely in terms of like what you need done. But, I think if, like you said, if there were more conversations with the people who are designing these and the cities that actually are controlling that code, I think it would definitely be beneficial.
You know what they should do? Each jurisdiction within their planning and building department should have one person or two person, kind of like qualitative team that elects projects that are being submitted to be like, okay, I think this is a great project. I think we could tweak a few things here and make it like, this like 10 times better thing.
Yeah, the challenge is you got to make sure that there's one or two people have their heads on straight.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it's just hard to find.
But
I have high hopes, for this world.
But it's true. But
or
I
if
think
there was some kind of, I don't know, like let's say 5 projects a year get awarded special zoning, whatever, because they're proposing something great. Like, like some sort of incentive, and still where you check out certain criteria to make the cut, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not based on who you know at the city or how expensive the project is or this or that, but it's more about the quality of the project you're proposing.
Well, the word quality I think is a good one, because it also goes back to a lot of things you've said, including the pizza story. I'm gonna call it that, the two pizza neighborhood, because it's you're hitting on, in that case, all the technical stuff and all the whys and the engineering and things, but it's through a qualitative lens. And I feel like that's the umbrella, right? It's like, what do you experience as a human being? Does it feel good or does it feel bad? Like fundamental, and is it safe, right? That's like really what we're getting at. But that just requires a much broader view, which is hard for people to have sometimes, because they like to focus on that thing, focus on the metrics, focus on the fact that I don't ride a bike, focus on very, very specific things. And not everybody, I guess, has the interest or is willing to have that bigger pic. It's at the same time, it's simultaneously a bigger picture, but also a very small picture of like, what does it just feel like to be there? And I think that's also why I really appreciate what you're doing, because you kind of do, you do both very well. And I think that's like maybe the key to unlocking some of this, is having more of that, and that would encourage people to it encourage the system to be more open to better solutions. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a good point of like how people feel, because that's kind of, I think that's why, especially with like roads, I think that's why it becomes so subjective, is because it all comes down to like how people feel and like what they want to prioritize when it comes to like the built environment. And so, if people are sitting in traffic, like that doesn't feel good for them. And so it's like they want to do something that will eliminate that feeling of, being stuck in traffic. And so that might look like adding more lanes, but now someone else feels unsafe walking along it, or like the people that live there feel uncomfortable with the level of noise that is produced, or and like it really does all come back to like how people feel, and it's like a competing aspect of like, okay, how can we all make sure we have something that feels best for everyone? And it's, there's usually never a perfect solution, because it's like, uh, there's always compromises to be made for the most part if there's money involved in space, which, every time there
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
it's always competing for money or space. And it's like, uh, but like, it's a great point. And again, like coming back to the human psychology of it, like it does come down to like how people feel. And like if someone's biking, they want to feel safe and enjoyable doing so. And that requires putting in dedicated bike facilities maybe. And like, but again, that maybe that takes away from a vehicle lane, and so now traffic is worse, and people that are sitting in traffic now feel irritated with having to wait longer. And
Right.
so it's definitely all a balance game.
A couple final questions, because I just realized that we're almost at the hour. One is, so what's next for you? Do you think it's going to be scaling up, as I alluded to earlier, or is something else on the horizon?
He said he's going to come to LA and fix LA.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's right. You're here next week.
LA.
Yeah.
That's what I'm scaling up for, because I know it's going to be a huge task.
Yeah. That would be amazing. But yeah, so what's next for you?
Continuing on with kind of some of the content stuff that I'm doing, I want to branch out into some more, just some more like avenues of work with that. I always love like highlighting projects. I think that's been something that I've done a little bit here and there, but like I always get really good feedback whenever I'm highlighting different projects that have occurred, because I think it's both encouraging for people to see that like, oh, this is actually happening, and like, if this community did it, then we can too. But it also just kind of gives some validation to the work, I think, and like, being able to congratulate a place for like, hey, you did this really good thing. You probably had 1 million people scream at you in the town hall meetings, but like at least this cool video on the internet that millions of people are watching, they're all, cheering you on. So I think there's like a good optimism opportunity for it too, to be able to like do some of that stuff. And like I said, like it just resonates really well with people too.
How do you find those let's say those, I'm gonna call them projects? Like, do people send them to you as a suggestion? Do you like scrub the internet and the news every day to find like those little gems? Like, how does it work?
A mix of both. Some of it I just stumble across on my own, and then sometimes people send stuff in.
I feel like you're the type of person who's probably continually inspired or inquisitive when you go out. You're just out in everyday life.
Oh yeah, I would say so.
Nice. And then go ahead.
My final question would be: is there a let's say a road, an intersection, or something that you've come across that is maybe the strangest one you've seen so far, or the most complex one, or maybe the most incredible one, whichever way?
Oh no, but the last part was my question.
I want to know what's the strangest one, to be honest.
You do the strangest one, because my question was going to be the best.
Okay.
Strangest one, I think, was this past summer. I specifically went to it because I had probably 100 messages over the last 2 years or whatever that have told me to go to this intersection. And so I was out, I think it was in Connecticut or Massachusetts. It's like right on the state border area. And it's called the Magic Roundabout on Google Maps. Like it even has a Google Maps posting.
Wow.
And it's technically kind of like, it's like a circular intersection. I wouldn't call it a roundabout. It's just like a lot of lanes and a lot of chaos. They even have a sign in the middle of the intersection that says dangerous intersection. which I thought was just really funny. Like as if the chaos wasn't enough, like they needed to put a sign up to let you know. Um, there will
Oh
be a video about
gosh,
it
yeah,
at some
we're
point, though.
looking at it.
I did get some video of it. I don't even know like where to begin though, because I know people are going to be like, "Well, fix it. Like, how are you going to do it better?" I'm like, man, I don't know. You
Wipe it
tell
clean,
me.
start over.
Yeah,
Because
erase
it
from
has
Google
like a
Maps.
bunch of different intersection or like a bunch of different roads coming into it from different angles and stuff, and so and it's kind of just like a they built around it in certain ways that like it feels like it was just like pieced together like over
Yeah.
150 years or something. Just someone changed it then, and then someone changed it then, and they tried to make something else work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
it's in New
that's
England, so it's like that's kind of the vibe of a lot of the roads out there too.
yeah, yeah. That's an interesting. I know we got to wrap it up, but that's an interesting point because I think a lot of the bad intersections, the bad places, the bad whatever that we have are a result of, you know, sometimes it's things being overlapped over time and no one has taken a holistic view of it and said, wait a second, if we keep, it's like remodel, like in our case, if we remodel a
Yeah.
house like 50 times, like things get really funky. Like
Yeah.
no one's taken time to step back and say, okay, do we keep remodeling this or do we try and approach it differently? And it's also, it just, again, that bigger vision of what we're producing as an experience rather than just focusing on, you know, a Band-Aid solution for this and that. So my final question though is, what is your favorite place?
My favorite place. Um,
I suppose it could be an intersection or it could be a street, it could be anything, but yeah, favorite place.
hmm, that is very vague. I don't even know what angle to go about this. Um, I would say I love the city that I live in. It's like it's a great size for just like how I like to live my life. It's close to nature. It's like very walkable, uh, very bikeable. It's just like a very beautiful place. And I don't know, it also just feels like home to me because I was raised in this area.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's just like it's a good life here. And so I would say that, I guess.
I love that.
That works. Yeah.
That's great. Also because I don't know many people who would say that.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
that's
that
the
is
thing.
true.
I feel like
That is
it
true.
also has made me realize of like how many people hate where they live. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Like I love coming back home. Like and like especially when it comes to like urban design, I'm just like, wow, it's so nice to be back like in a little walkable place again.
Awesome. Well, this the time flew by. Thank you so much for taking the time with us on a Friday. We hope to continue the conversation, and we look forward to seeing you in LA shortly with your grand plan to
Oh yeah,
make it
me
more
and the
pedestrian.
whole army of Streetcraft people will be there soon.
I
That
love it.
sounds
I
great.
love it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so much,
Noah.
Noah.
Yes, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.